Have you ever trusted someone so completely, so blindly, that you let them inside the deepest chambers of your heart and home, only to find that darkness doesn't always come dressed in shadows? Sometimes it wears the mask of a savior, even as it systematically destroys everything you hold dear. That's the story you're about to hear, a story that twisted my faith in love, friendship, and the sacred boundaries of family beyond recognition. My name is Robert Johnson, and I used to think I knew the contours of love and loyalty. I believed that love was something you simply felt, that trust grew from shared experiences, and that family was an unbreakable bond. I had no idea that there are forms of evil so subtle, so insidious, that you won't know you've welcomed them in until it's almost too late. This is the story of how my life unraveled and was woven back together again by the courage of my daughters and the enduring power of love that not even betrayal can suffocate. If you're listening now, know that this isn't just a cautionary tale of heartbreak. It's proof that hope can survive even the bleakest winter. Please, before you go further, take a moment to hit subscribe, tap like, and let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Because if even one family is spared the pain mine endured, it will all be worth it. Before I let you into the darkness, I want you to imagine the kind of person who could destroy everything you treasure, not by brute force, but by empathy, service, and the slow erosion of trust. They say the devil can quote scripture, but nobody warns you that the devil might also bake your children's birthday cakes or hold your hand through tragedy. I was too trusting, too focused on putting one foot in front of the other. After loss, I should have looked closer at the cracks forming in the foundation of my family, but I didn't. Maybe you'll see what I missed. Maybe you have a Laura in your life right now. This story is not just about the dangers of misplaced faith, nor is it a mere retelling of a family tragedy. It is a testament to perseverance, a lesson in never underestimating the resilience of children, and a warning that sometimes the greatest threat comes from within your circle of trust. Through betrayal and heartbreak, my 3 daughters became beacons of hope, and I, through the searing pain of almost losing everything, discovered what it means to truly protect my family. When I first met Joanne, I was 28 and raw from the losses that come all too often in youth. My mother, hoping to nudge me back into society after a spell of isolation, all but dragged me to a community barbecue one muggy Atlanta Sunday. I stood awkwardly beside the spread of Southern comfort food, hesitating over coleslaw or potato salad, feeling every bit the outsider, intent on remaining invisible. Across the churchyard, laughter erupted, a musical, unforced sound that cut through the heat and melancholy alike. That laughter belonged to Joanne, a woman whose light seemed immune to even the heaviest Georgia humidity. She stood surrounded by a flock of children, animating them with stories, grandiose gestures, and an expressive face that made the mundane magical. It wasn't just her physical beauty that caught my attention. Though her brown skin glowed in a yellow sundress, and her natural hair was perfectly pulled back. Rather, it was the generosity she showed to every single child. She stooped, met their eyes on equal level, and fielded questions, both silly and wise, with the same respect an adult would hope for. That day, I saw in her not just a pretty face, but a partner, an equal, a dreamer, and above all, a person whose heart expanded to fit everyone around her. Lessons bloom. It didn't take me long to find excuses to orbit Joanne for the rest of that steamy afternoon. I carried plates, helped clean up after the kids' games, and tried to say clever things, though I'm sure my nervousness was obvious. Each conversation revealed a new dimension to her compassion. Lessons bloom. I learned that Joanne taught second grade and sometimes talked about her students as if they were her own. She volunteered at a homeless shelter every weekend and faithfully sent money home to her grandmother in Alabama, never missing a nightly phone call to the woman who'd raised her. When we spoke, her attention was absolute. Joanne remembered small details, my favorite teams, the name of a cousin I'd nearly forgotten, stories I'd shared weeks before. She kept a mental calendar of friends' birthdays and struggles, always showing up with a note, a flower, or a casserole when someone needed it most. I was captivated, inspired, and before the day was done, determined to see her again. I wasn't the only one drawn to Joanne's orbit that day. Somewhere in the background hovered Laura, a figure I barely noticed at first. She was Joanne's oldest friend, her companion from nursing school. A little shorter and rounder than Joanne, Laura carried herself with a seriousness that made her beautiful in an unconventional, almost brooding way. While Joanne was whimsical, Laura seemed composed, slightly withdrawn, offering supportive smiles that never quite reached the depths of her eyes. Looking back, knowing what I do now, I wonder why I didn't pay more attention to the little signs, the lingering looks Laura cast our way, the subtle tightness around her mouth whenever she saw Joanne laughing with someone else. On that day, though, my gaze and my heart belonged wholly to Joanne. When I asked her to dinner as the sun dipped behind the church's steeple, she smiled so radiantly, it felt like I'd been handed a second chance at happiness. Joanne and I dated for 2 years that felt both fleeting and infinite. We dove into life together, sharing dreams and fears, talking late into the night about everything and nothing. She confessed to me her yearning for a noisy, bustling home, a place where children never wondered if they were wanted, and no one came home to an empty kitchen. She told stories of solitude growing up as an only child while her parents worked multi-shift jobs, and how that loneliness sparked dreams of family, connection, and a house filled with laughter and love. I, in turn, shared my hope of building a legacy, running a small construction business, designing a home where family could grow, and watching twilight settle from the comfort of a backyard porch. Those conversations weren't just about castles in the sky. They wove tangible dreams. Joanne mapped out garden rows and reading nooks, drew sketches of the breakfast bench where we'd eat French toast with our children. We both wanted something lasting. Neither one of us sensed the storm gathering on the horizon. Through it all, every milestone, every celebration, Laura was present. She was there at birthdays, holidays, and housewarmings. Joanne never questioned Laura's role in our lives. To her, Laura was the sister she never had, the friend who had seen her through heartbreaks, graduations, and triumphs. To me, Laura was helpful, reliable, perhaps a bit too involved, but never a cause for concern. Hindsight is a cruel teacher. I wish I glimpsed the envy beneath Laura's loyal facade. By the time I proposed to Joanne, our relationship felt destined. I orchestrated an evening at her favorite Piedmont Park gazebo, one Laura had helped me pick out, complete with hidden flowers, a photographer, and the ring Joanne had once admired through a shop window. Laura consulted on every detail. She helped choose roses over lilies because Joanne's grandmother had grown roses, selected a classic diamond cut that exuded elegance without ostentation, and even coached me through proposal speeches until the words tasted true. On the big day, Laura arrived an hour early to ensure perfection. Tissues for happy tears, water for my dry-throated nerves, and backup plans in case of rain. As I knelt before Joanne, Laura snapping photos from behind a tree, everything else dissolved. Joanne said yes before the full question left my lips, enveloping me in tears, laughter, and embrace. Laura was first to hug us both, squeezing so tightly I nearly gasped for air. I took her affection as proof of loyalty, a best friend's happiness, at the engagement of her chosen family. Only much later, haunted by everything that followed, would I recognize the possessiveness in her grip and the darkness flickering behind her eyes. Joanne and I celebrated our wedding in Atlanta's Ebenezer Baptist Church with a reception that felt like a blessing on our union. Laura, naturally, was maid of honor, and her speech drew tears from nearly every guest. She painted a portrait of perfect friendship, pledging to support us, echoing how she'd be by our side through thick and thin. She orchestrated every aspect of wedding planning with military precision, fielding caterers, negotiating color schemes, and managing RSVP lists as if her life depended on it. I remember thinking how lucky Joanne was for such a devoted friend, never considering the depth of Laura's investment or the risks it posed. Once married, Joanne and I put down roots. We bought a modest house in Decatur, lovingly decorating it together, imagining which room would become a nursery or playroom. Joanne's hospitality drew people in. Our home transformed into a gathering spot for neighbors, friends, and colleagues. Laura was always included, arriving first and leaving last, preparing dishes that complemented Joanne's menu, and providing centerpieces from her own garden. Joanne's gratitude echoed frequently. Laura's the sister I never had. I can't picture my life without her. Meanwhile, Laura's own life seemed to orbit ours. She advanced in her career as a cardiac nurse at Emory University Hospital, working long shifts, yet always finding time to join our family events. She spun tales of medicine and miracles, adventures in the cardiac unit, and whispered advice to Joanne about nutrition and health. Laura was undeniably knowledgeable and supportive. I missed the clues that her sense of belonging to our family went beyond mere friendship. Her helpfulness was, in retrospect, the first chapter in a much darker story. 3 years into our marriage, Joanne and I convinced ourselves it was time to grow our family. When she became pregnant, both of us wept with joy. During a routine scan, the news of triplets sent shockwaves of euphoria and terror through our home. Suddenly, every conversation was about car seats, nursery layouts, bulk diaper purchases, and the logistics of keeping one's sanity amid a trio of newborns. Joanne glowed through much of her pregnancy, even as it became markedly difficult. The physical demands of carrying triplets tested every limit she possessed. Relentless nausea, debilitating fatigue, swelling joints, and back pain that made sleep a rare luxury. Laura's expertise became indispensable. She researched high-risk pregnancy management, coordinated with Joanne's obstetrician, and supplied endless recipes for superfoods, meant to boost stamina and soothe frazzled nerves. She brought herbal teas and homeopathic remedies, and even arranged prenatal massages. I was deeply grateful, often feeling out of my depth as Joanne struggled to keep food down or manage pain. Laura's calming certainty filled in the gaps. When Joanne delivered after a grueling labor, our 3 daughters, Jasmine, Jade, and Joy, arrived amid a storm of nerves, tears, and wonder. Each tiny girl seemed to radiate her own emerging personality. Jasmine, vocal and demanding from her first breath. Jade, unusually alert with wide, searching eyes. And Joy, content, radiant with calm. Joanne, even exhausted, was luminous, cradling our daughters as if holding the sum of all blessings. The hospital kept Joanne for longer than expected, wary of her weakened heart. Amid critical care visits and erratic sleep, Laura became our anchor, bringing flowers, photographing the girls, comforting Joanne's anxious family, and orchestrating homecomings. She was indispensable, never missing a day, eagerly taking on night shifts and baby duty, even as she kept her own work commitments. When we stumbled through the mayhem of bringing 3 infants home, I credited Laura's diligence with saving our sanity and giving our daughters the best start possible. For 3 weeks, our new family found a rhythm. Joanne's gentle touch and intuition guided us. She seemed to know each girl's moods and needs before they did. Laura filled every gap I missed. I began to suspect, on some level, that Laura's involvement was more than altruistic, that she was staking a claim larger than her aunt title allowed. But necessity and exhaustion blinded me to the risks and boundaries I should have reinforced. "We're lucky to have her," Joanne would say, and I would agree. Neither of us imagined that luck would one day tip into tragedy. It took only weeks before Joanne's health began a mystifying, steady decline. At first, Her fatigue and discomfort seemed explainable. 3 infants, endless feeding cycles, and sleepless nights are daunting for any parent, let alone one recovering from a high-risk birth. But the signs soon grew ominous. Joanne found herself out of breath after walking across a room, clutching her side after picking up a baby. Her cheeks lost their color. Her body thinned despite her efforts to eat well. Sometimes she would wake breathless and trembling, her heart racing from phantom terrors. Lessons bloom, rooting the story. Doctors chalked her symptoms up to postpartum challenges, a plausible enough explanation with 3 babies to feed and soothe. Laura, always poised and knowledgeable, was there for every emergency, every late-night panic. She dutifully recorded Joanne's blood pressure and heart rate, updated doctors by phone, prepared binders of research about rare postpartum complications. She advocated tirelessly, helping arrange medications, monitoring dosages, organizing pill boxes, and reminding Joanne never to miss a dose. The official diagnosis came weeks later: postpartum cardiomyopathy. It was devastating, but the doctors were encouraging. Many women recover fully with proper medication and care. Yet, as the seasons changed, Joanne did not improve. She cycled through treatments, but kept calling the same complaint. The drugs made everything worse, amplifying dizziness, nausea, and pain. Her appetite waned, and she sometimes gagged at Laura's elaborate, heart-healthy meals, but ate dutifully, trusting Laura's expertise completely. As the months passed, our lives became a sequence of hospital stays, medication changes, and growing despair. Laura's presence escalated. She began sleeping over, just in case, shouldering more and more of parental and household duties. I was grateful on the surface, but a voice, small and distant, began to question why Laura seemed never tired, never exasperated, and always perfectly prepared for every contingency. Joanne's slide from independence to reliance was swift. Before long, she could barely manage the stairs or keep up with the simplest chores. When the girls turned 3, the decline accelerated. The doctors spoke in whispers, mentioning advanced treatments, maybe a transplant. All the while, Laura was ever present, hovering and attentive, never missing an opportunity to feed, medicate, or counsel Joanne. One night, as I sat beside Joanne's hospital bed, listening to the hum of machinery and my wife's shallow breaths, she took my hands in her icy grip. Her voice, barely more than a whisper, trembled as she bade me a heartbreaking farewell. "Promise me you'll keep living, that you'll choose love again when the time is right, and that you'll guard our girls against all harm." That night, I vowed everything she asked, unaware how soon her absence would hollow out our world and how utterly I would struggle to keep her final promise. Subscribe and hit like. Our powerful stories add years to your life. Join our Story Lovers Club and let us know in the comments, where are you listening from? Joanne's passing transformed the house from a sanctuary into a mausoleum. The sunlight through our kitchen window illuminated dust motes rather than laughter. The walls seemed to echo with the faintest memory of her humming. Amid this unbearable quiet, duty compelled me to go on. I had 3 daughters, each a living testament to Joanne's love and dreams. Jasmine, Jade, and Joy needed more than simple survival. They deserved a father who would honor their mother's memory by keeping them safe, nurturing their bright spirits. At first, I poured myself into routines, waking early, prepping healthy meals, braiding hair to match the girls' moods, learning the melodies that calmed their tempers. There were moments of pure exhaustion when I teetered on the edge of despair, holding back tears while cradling my daughters against my chest. Those were the moments, raw, exposed, when Laura's presence crept in, as necessary as the air I breathed. Laura seemed carved from certainty. She stepped up to organize life not only for the girls, but for me. Before I could stumble over breakfast menus, she had prepped spinach omelets and laid out lunchboxes. When playdates or afternoon meltdowns loomed, Laura intervened with books and snacks, diffusing tantrums with practiced patience. She sorted through the bills, coordinated memorial arrangements, and kept my in-laws updated with clinical precision. To anyone watching, Laura was the extension of Joanne's protective instinct. Selfless, tireless, and always available. In grief's numbing haze, I clung to her steadiness and comforted myself with the belief that Joanne had left her most loyal friend to carry the load alongside me. Yet, grief has a way of sharpening perception. Even as I depended on Laura, subtle warnings surfaced. My daughters, formerly inseparable clusters of energy, began shifting their allegiance. Jasmine rebelled against bedtime, bursting into tears when Laura offered comfort instead of me. Jade, usually empathetic and stoic, withdrew, feigning sleep or hiding in the garden to avoid Laura's hovering presence. Joy, the gentlest of the 3, clung to her sisters more ardently, whispering questions she was too afraid to ask aloud. It took months for these warning signs to break through my fog. At first, I misinterpreted their behavior as classic grieving, the kind of turbulence any child might display after losing their mother. But there was a rhythm to their discomfort, an unease that bloomed in Laura's company and receded when she left for work. The girls quieted conversations or froze mid-play whenever Laura entered the room, eyes flickering to their hands as if seeking silent reassurance from one another. My protective instincts, dulled by exhaustion and grief, began sparking back to life, though guilt shadowed every suspicion. Was I imagining things? Was Laura's help so essential in those early days at odds with my daughter's real needs? My own sorrow made me desperate for connection, yet the girls' withdrawal became impossible to ignore. Their teachers called, concerned that Jasmine no longer raised her hand to answer questions, that Jade snapped at classmates, and Joy shrank from playground games. I tried asking my daughters, but their answers were hollow echoes. "We're fine, Daddy. We're just tired." Only when I pressed one night, holding Jade while storms lashed against the windows, did she confide in me, her voice as small as the whimpers that sometimes slipped from her in sleep. "We miss Mama. But we don't like being alone with Auntie Laura. She makes us feel like we're not ourselves anymore. The phrase sent a chill through me, though I couldn't puzzle it out. From that moment, I resolved to see the world through my girls' eyes, searching for whatever disturbance their keen young hearts detected before I even realized I should. Determined to restore some sense of familial equilibrium, I began pulling back from my reliance on Laura. At first, I limited the hours she spent at our house, framing it as a necessity for the girls' well-being. They need time to adjust, I explained, and we need to find new rhythms. Laura smiled, but her eyes flickered with a steely resistance I'd never noticed before. "Oh, Robert, I just want to help," she said. "You know how much I love the girls. Joanne trusted me. Don't shut me out." The intensity of her plea unsettled me, but guilt pressed me to keep her near. A legacy, I reasoned, of my wife's love. Over the weeks, as I eased, but the less time Laura spent in our home, the more resilient my daughters became. Their laughter, tentative at first, began to rebound. Jasmine rediscovered her love of drawing, filling the house with rainbows and superheroes, sometimes scribbling out a black, formless figure hovering in the background, an image that haunted me. Jade started helping Joy with schoolwork, organizing sister days where I'd overhear childish conspiracies and gales of giggles. I began to see, for the first time since Joanne's death, flickers of genuine joy tiptoeing back into their lives. Not all returned to harmony, though. Laura intensified her efforts to stay relevant. She dropped by with gifts, elaborate dolls, storybooks, board games, none of which truly sparked the girls' interest. On weekends, she pestered for sleepovers, suggesting the girls needed girl time away from their overwhelmed father. I refused, instinctively unwilling to hand over nighttime guardianship to anyone but myself. At work, Laura left me careful voicemails, reminders she was always just a call away. Her devotion no longer seemed an act of kindness, but a performance, one that demanded reciprocation, whether I was willing to give it or not. As my daughters regained their voices and laughter, I noticed Laura's energy changed. Our conversations became colder, tinged with a subtle bitterness, an unspoken accusation that I had violated some unspoken pact. "Remember who was there when nobody else was," she told me one Sunday after church. I tried to thank her, but the gratitude felt hollow. It was clear that the debt Laura felt I owed could never fully be repaid. Around this time, a new friend entered our world, Grace Martin, a neighbor whose family had moved into the house down the block just before Joanne's passing. Grace was kind, unhurried, and gentle with the girls, always seeking their consent before joining their tea parties or movie nights. She brought over blueberry muffins, shyly confiding that her own husband had died in Afghanistan, and she understood how hard it was to parent alone. Unlike Laura, Grace waited for invitations, respecting boundaries and listening more than she spoke. Under her friendship, the girls flourished even further, their circle of trust slowly widening around this gentle new presence. When Grace invited us to her daughter's birthday barbecue, I accepted gratefully, watching the girls run wild with other children, screaming with delight as they tumbled through sprinklers. That afternoon, Laura appeared on our doorstep, unannounced, disappointment palpable when she realized where we'd gone. "I thought we always did Sundays together," she murmured, her gaze slicing into my own. It was the first time I actively felt Laura's disappointment as hostility, a silent rivalry against the simple, organic friendships my children and I were building for ourselves. As months slipped by, life settled into a new, fragile normal. My daughters continued to heal. School projects spilled across the kitchen once more, and the girls' laughter returned to punctuate our evenings with a music I had feared forever lost. With each day, I drew more confidence in my own ability to parent solo. Routines, though exhausting, became comforting. Sunday afternoons were spent baking cookies or painting handmade cards for each other. Slowly, the overwhelming sense of absence faded, replaced by a gentle, if bittersweet, optimism that maybe, just maybe, we would move forward, carrying Joanne's love as a ballast. But the undercurrent of Laura's presence lingered. Though no longer omnipresent in our home, she found other ways to insert herself into the fabric of our lives. At church, she volunteered for every committee I joined. At school, she approached teachers, inquiring after the girls' well-being, sometimes relaying concerns she claimed other parents had voiced. She even managed to have coffee with Grace, under the guise of getting to know the new neighbors, only to report back to me with thinly veiled criticisms. "I'm just saying, you might want to watch your step. People talk." The implication was clear. My decisions, my efforts to let my family grow beyond Laura's oversight were being judged. My gratitude for Laura's earlier support became strained by resentment. She hovered at the edges of every event, watching for weaknesses, ready to swoop in whenever the smallest challenge arose. More than once, I caught her gently interrogating the girls, fishing for confessions of unhappiness or complaints that never quite materialized. When I addressed my discomfort with her, explaining that I respected her help but needed space, her response was wounded disbelief. "After everything I did for you, for Joanne?" she whispered. "I guess some people are easier to forget than others." The look in her eyes was not one of sadness, but of accusation, a threat wrapped in heartbreak. The escalation was subtle. Laura began challenging my parenting choices in public and private. She questioned why I'd changed the girls' school lunches, "Too much sugar, Robert," or why I let them play outside unsupervised, even though I could see them from the porch. At the same time, her gifts and kind gestures continued, always tethered to a reminder of her indispensability. "If you ever need anything, let me know. I'm right here." These moments, rather than reassuring, left me feeling helplessly scrutinized, as though my every move would somehow never measure up to her quiet, relentless perfection. One evening, after a particularly difficult day filled with tantrums and spilled glue, I put the girls to bed and found an envelope slid under our front door. Inside Scrawled in Laura's familiar script was a long note. She wrote about feeling betrayed, taken for granted, and cast aside as if I never mattered. The letter pulsed with bitterness, cataloging every moment she'd saved our family, ending with the chilling line, "Families don't discard their own. I hope you remember that loyalty has its price." My hands trembled as I read. No act of kindness had ever been asked of Laura. She had offered everything of her own free will. And yet, the expectation now was reciprocity, as if love and support were mere debts to be repaid on demand. I tucked the note into a locked drawer, unsure of what to say or do, but certain our lives had entered a new, unsettling phase. Autumn arrived with its blazes of color and crisp evenings, bringing with it plenty of distractions: school carnival preparations, Halloween costumes, and the smell of pumpkin muffins baking in the oven. The girls became excited over school projects, excitedly painting cardboard leaves and worrying over homework assignments. Life, for brief, magical stretches, felt ordinary again, at least on the surface. But the atmosphere at home remained charged. My relationship with Laura was now carefully managed, her visits brief and always supervised. There was a careful choreography to every interaction. I'd usher her into the main living area, keep the girls near me, and make sure that any conversation about Joanne or the past did not become a platform for guilt or manipulation. I no longer dismissed my daughter's fears or their creased, anxious brows during Laura's visits. I validated their discomfort, read bedtime stories, cuddled between Jasmine and Jade, and let joy climb into my lap when anxiety overcame her. Lessons bloom. The space between us, once threatened by grief, now filled with trust. A fragile trust, but real. My own vigilance expanded. I monitored school pickups, checked in with teachers regularly, and made sure Laura was not given any unsupervised time with the children. I also documented everything: my suspicions, concerns, and the behavioral changes I observed. If Laura was escalating her attempts to reinsert herself into our family, I resolved to anticipate every move. One chilly Friday evening, Laura tried to turn up unexpectedly while I was on a Zoom call for work. She let herself into the house with the spare key she'd been given a year earlier for emergencies. The girls froze at the kitchen table, visibly uneasy. I intercepted her with forced calm. "Laura, you can't just come by without calling. Please respect our routine." She bristled, but handed over a homemade casserole for the girls. I accepted it, but after she left, the dish found its way straight to the fridge and was later disposed of. An irrational caution, perhaps, but something in Laura's presence by now felt invasive, intrusive, like a wolf circling the perimeter, seeking the tiniest breach through which to slip inside. Around this time, Jasmine admitted to dreams where a shadowed figure chased her through the house, always just out of reach, whispering her name. "I wish Mama could chase her away," she whispered one night, her head pressed to my chest. It tore at me that my children's fears had taken shape in our home, that the very person I'd first trusted to protect them was now the source of such unease. Laura's campaign of guilt did not end there. She contacted Joanne's mother in Alabama, sharing her frustrations in hopes of finding an ally. Joanne's mother phoned, worried that the girls were losing their connection to family. I spent hours reassuring her, walking her through every new routine, every sign of the girls' progress. I sent photos and daily updates, determined that no misunderstanding would erode the hard-won safety within our household. Through the strain, Grace remained a steadfast support. She offered dinners at her house, free of obligation or judgment. In her warm kitchen, the boundaries were simple, the rules clear. The girls thrived around her, forging friendships with Grace's own children, learning the value of shared sorrow and rebuilt hope. The turning point, as so often in life, arrived without warning. One late evening, cold and bristling with the promise of the season's first frost, I received a frantic call from Jade's school principal. There had been a concerning incident. Apparently, Laura had shown up at dismissal, insisting she was there on my behalf to pick up the girls. The secretary recognized Laura, but knew something was off. She called the house, but I was at work and my cell was on silent. Only Grace, who'd arrived early for her own children, intervened. She informed the school that Laura was not authorized, staying close until I could be reached. The girls, shaken and confused, were thankfully unharmed, but the sense of violation was inescapable. That night, after I put my daughters to bed, I sat at the kitchen table and allowed the full weight of what had happened to settle over me. I replayed the months leading up to this, every polite refusal, every sudden gift, Laura's mounting resentment. It was as if she was testing the boundaries, daring me to draw a hard line. My pulse pounded with anger, fear, and a ferocious resolve to not let Joanne's final wish, protect our girls, be betrayed. I contacted Joanne's mother, explained the situation, and formally rescinded Laura's emergency contact privileges at school and daycare. I changed the locks on our house the following weekend, explaining honestly but gently to the girls that sometimes keeping our family safe meant resetting boundaries with people, even people who once helped us. I prepared for backlash, but Laura, perhaps sensing the walls closing around her, grew uncharacteristically silent. Her calls slowed, her visits ceased, and our home's air finally began to sweeten, as if the shadow that had clung to the corners had at last withdrawn. In the aftermath, I spoke with Grace about everything, every detail, fear, and regret. She listened with open-hearted patience, offering no judgment. "You did what any loving parent would do," she told me. I realized then that family is not only blood or the promises of the past, but also the choices we make, the boundaries we keep, and the hope we carry forward. Through it all, my daughters and I began building anew, drawing new pictures, baking new recipes, and inventing rituals that belonged only to us. It was not the life Joanne and I had originally envisioned, but it was ours. Under the delicate, indomitable strength of my daughters, I glimpsed a future where we could thrive, not just survive. In that vision, Joanne's love endured, not as a shadow, but as a beacon guiding us safely home. The aftermath of fully severing Laura's access to our lives was more challenging than I'd expected. For so many years, Laura had been an omnipresent backup, always ready with a casserole, a bandage, or an ear. And eliminating her from our orbit left a vacuum filled by a strange blend of anxiety and freedom. My daughters reacted in different ways. Jasmine once ran to the door on hearing the bell and visibly relaxed when it was only Grace. Jade became more protective of her sisters, always quick to check locks or watch the windows before bed. Even Joy, usually lighthearted, asked repeatedly if people could come in without asking now. Lessons bloom. In these small rituals, I saw the lingering shadow of the past, the traces of a presence that had overreached, leaving fingerprints on my children's sense of what was safe and who belonged. But time, as my grandmother used to say, is both a healer and a teacher. Weeks fell into a tentative routine marked by laughter and an undercurrent of vigilance. Lock checks, phone tree confirmations, detailed after-school pickup plans. Bit by bit, the girls began to talk about their experiences, not always directly, but through art projects, make-believe games, and the confessions whispered just before sleep. Jasmine drew a series of pictures, each showing our home at sunrise, windows glowing with light and bright flowers lining the walkway. In every drawing, a circle appeared at the door, sometimes Laura, frowning, sometimes a smiling Joanne, arms open. Jade wrote her feelings in the little diary she kept hidden under her pillow. One night, as I tucked her in, she nervously handed me a page that read, "I like it when just us are home. I miss Mommy a lot." I think she would like how our house feels now. My heart ached reading those lines, so simple and yet so profound in what they revealed about the ways children sense danger and crave peace. There was still fallout to manage. At church, a few old friends of Joanne approached me, quietly voicing concern that Laura was going through a tough time. Some urged reconciliation or suggested that boundaries could be softened. But I stood firm, gently insisting that hewing was contingent on respect, for privacy, for safety, for the sanctity of my family's new shape. It was uncomfortable, but necessary for every person who challenged me. Another confided their own stories of friends or relatives unable to respect said boundaries, always with a hint of gratitude that I'd been willing to take a stand. Lessons bloom. In counseling, something both for me and soon for the girls, we began to untangle the knots left by 2 years of ambiguous loyalties. My therapist helped me see that what I'd mistaken for help from Laura had, in the end, been a slow usurpation of parental power, an erasure of my daughter's agency and comfort. It was a hard lesson, rooted in the difference between support and control, between nurturing and encroachment. The girls' counselor, a warm woman named Mrs. Taylor, helped each of my daughters reclaim a sense of security. They learned that feelings of unease are valid, that even adults can sometimes make mistakes in whom they trust, and that their voices mattered when it came to their own well-being. As autumn waned, a season of genuine healing finally arrived. My focus shifted from merely protecting the girls from harm towards truly nurturing their unique, resilient spirits. Slowly, our home became a space for new traditions and shared joys. Every Friday was memory night, a ritual we invented to help fill the void Joanne had left and to honor the beautiful parts of our past. We'd draw pictures of happy days with Mom, tell each other stories, then finish with a song she used to sing at bedtime. At first there were tears, but as the weeks rolled by, laughter began to outweigh the sadness, as if the act of recalling love out loud restored some lost piece of her. Grace, gently and respectfully, became more woven into our daily lives. She never pushed, but stood ready whenever we needed help. A ride to school if I hit traffic, an extra place set at her table for impromptu dinners. Kind notes and homemade bread dropped on our porch, with no expectation of return. My daughters trusted her in their own time. Joy asked first to feed Grace's cat while she was out, and Jasmine started drawing Grace and her children into family pictures, always with our circle intact, boundaries honored, no shadows lurking just beyond. The bond was one of mutual respect and care, learned in the crucible of hardship and forged by honesty. The school year progressed, and with it, my daughter's confidence grew. Jasmine wrote an essay about courage, describing the magic of drawing rainbows after storms. Jade joined the math club, organizing team meetings, and to my surprise, winning a citywide competition. Joy, who once hardly spoke to anyone outside our family, auditioned for the school play, and despite nerves, won the part of a singing bird in the spring musical. Attending her performance, seeing my once diminished daughter claim space on a bright stage, her voice clear and bright, left me openly weeping in the front row. I realized in that moment the full meaning of Joanne's final wish, to build a future carved from love, hope, and the courage to protect what mattered most. As the holidays approached, the specter of Laura diminished until it became little more than a cautionary tale in our family's collective story. She tried once, just before Christmas, to leave a present on our doorstep, a stuffed bear with a note reading, "For old time's sake." I returned it to her apartment, leaving a simple card explaining that, for my daughter's healing, we could not accept gifts or visits but wished her peace. It was the hardest thing I'd had to do. Final closure with someone who once meant so much, now forever kept on the outside. That winter, for the first time since Joanne's death, our home shone from within. We decorated with more lights than ever before, invited the neighborhood to a cookie swap, and filled every room with warmth and gentle courage. Joanne's spirit seemed present in every hug, every burst of laughter, every kind word uttered in her memory. I felt myself breathing easier, standing more confidently in the reality I'd built, one that was honest, a little scarred, but undeniably our own. It's remarkable how resilience reveals itself, not only in great acts of heroism, but in small, everyday victories. Mornings when no one cries over breakfast, afternoons filled with friends and muddy shoes, quiet nights when a child falls asleep in your lap without nightmares. These moments, imperceptible to outsiders yet monumental for us, became the true measure of our recovery. Our life, while nothing like the illusion of perfect domestic happiness I once envisioned, was vibrant and real, layered with imperfection, vulnerability, and astonishing growth. Occasionally, the wound of Laura's betrayal reopened. A familiar voice at church, a question from a well-meaning neighbor, even a stray news article about someone overstepping their welcome in a grieving family's life. But the shock lessened each time, replaced by a steely resolve I'd once doubted I could muster. I learned not to apologize for defending my family, for drawing clear lines around our trust. I discovered that the greatest acts of love sometimes look, to outsiders, like acts of exclusion. But for those within, they are acts of salvation. One evening, as spring warmed our garden, the girls and I planted wildflower seeds along the fence line. The air was thick with the scent of wet earth and the laughter of children no longer weighed down by fear. We spoke of dreams, Jasmine hoping to be an artist, Jade eager to travel, Joy wishing to grow the tallest sunflowers ever. In this act, I finally allowed myself to dream again too. I began to see not just my daughter's futures, but my own, unfolding beyond the horizon of grief and guilt. About once a month, I met with Mrs. Taylor, the girls' counselor, to discuss their progress. She became not just an advisor, but in many ways, a lifeline. "You've done what so many are afraid to do, Robert. You believed your children," she told me on one such evening. "You taught them their voices matter, even in the darkest moments." That's a gift they'll carry forever. Her words stayed with me, reminders of the journey we'd taken, the importance of trusting your instincts, even against the pull of social expectation. I also gave myself permission to begin setting new goals, at work, with friends, even in my own personal life. I reached out to old college friends for coffee. I started attending a fatherhood group where men who'd walked roads like mine met to share worries, advice, and the loneliness of single parenthood. Among the stories of loss and restoration, I found camaraderie, a reminder that the work of rebuilding is never truly done alone. The story of Laura faded gradually, but never completely vanished. My daughters, each wise in her own way, occasionally asked questions that revealed the depth of their processing. "Why did Aunt Laura want to be with us so much?" Joy asked one night, tracing the patterns on her duvet with a fingertip. She seemed like she hated us sometimes. It was an impossible question, one that no tidy answer would soothe. But I spoke the truth as plainly as I could. Aunt Laura was hurting, and sometimes hurt people make choices that don't feel good to others. That doesn't mean you did anything wrong. You girls never have to spend time with anyone that makes you feel unsafe, no matter what that person has done for our family in the past. Your feelings matter, and Dad will always listen. I watched my daughters process this, weighing the complexities that so often accompany adult relationships and betrayals. For Jasmine, it meant returning to her art, drawing ever more detailed scenes of our lives, our family garden, trips to the park, birthday parties where every face smiled, real and imagined. For Jade, it meant keeping her secret diary and sharing news stories only when she felt safe. For Joy, it meant sitting close on the couch, cuddling, and letting herself be silly, something that had been in short supply during the dark months. Spring brought with it celebrations of life. We took a trip to Joanne's mother's farm in Alabama. There, among azaleas and the warm southern breeze, the girls ran wild, hugged cousins, and listened to old family stories. Joanne's mother welcomed us with open arms, folding herself around my daughters, letting them know they would always be wanted, never alone. We visited Joanne's grave together, planting sunflowers and singing her favorite hymns, giving the girls permission to mourn and celebrate in whatever way felt right. Returning home, our lives brimmed with new rituals. Sunday dinners with Grace's family became a fixture, and the girls made new friends at school, building wider safety nets, experimenting with trust in small, controlled steps. I finally realized the greatest victory over pain is not pretending it never happened, but teaching your children how to move through it, stronger and kinder on the other side. As the seasons cycled, so did the rhythms of our household. Summer loomed with its promise of long evenings, sticky ice cream hands, and lazy mornings where no alarm pierced our dreams. The girls grew surer every day, independent in new ways, yet still linked by fierce loyalty to each other and to me. Sometimes I watched them and saw not the wounds we'd endured, but the resilience reflected in the easy trust they extended toward chosen friends and safe adults. That summer, for the first time since Joanne died, I felt genuinely capable, not just of surviving, but of thriving, blooming. The trauma that Laura had introduced into our home, her manipulation, her boundary crossings, her relentless campaign for control, no longer haunted our every decision. Cautious, yes, but not fearful. We took family hikes, tried canoeing, let the girls camp in the backyard. Each new adventure was a step away from the past, a stride toward a future filled with hope, friendship, and the bright possibility of loving and being loved well. I allowed myself to consider, quietly, what it might be like to love again. Grace and I spent more time together, and though our friendship was grounded in mutual respect and shared sorrow, we allowed the gentle curiosity of new beginnings to take root. The girls accepted her presence graciously, knowing their boundaries would always be respected, their comfort never sacrificed. With Grace, there was no pressure, only the simple joy of shared moments. Stargazing from the back porch, wrestling with yard work, cheering at school soccer games. There was room to breathe, to dream, to imagine that life after loss could again hold laughter and the warmth of another's hand. By the time summer ended, I understood what Joanne had hoped for in her final request. This was the promise I'd clung to in the darkest hours, that love would one day light our way, even in the aftermath of betrayal. And that through courage, steadfast boundaries, and unwavering devotion, a family could not only endure cruelty from within, but rise stronger, closer, and more luminous than before. As days bled into years, the wounds Laura left on our family no longer defined us. Instead, what endured was the tapestry of tiny rituals and bold steps forward, each woven with care, determination, and love. Our story, once one of shadows and silence, became one of voices, clear, distinctive, rising in unison. Even when the world outside sometimes questioned choices it could never fully understand. As the new school year began, the girls returned to their classrooms with the confidence of survivors. Jasmine, forever the artist, decorated her locker with swooping birds and cascading morning glories. Her teachers marveled at her progress. Not only had she reclaimed her laughter, but she discovered a new gift for mentoring younger students, gently guiding them through the first stumbles of learning. Jade, fiercely loyal and blossoming into her own quiet authority, ran for class representative and won, a testament not just to her intelligence, but to the integrity her experiences had shaped. Joy, luminous and bold, became the first to volunteer at school assemblies, her voice ringing with pride as she read poems she'd written about safe houses and brave hearts. For the first time as a parent, I witnessed my daughters begin to forge their own traditions, reaching outward toward the world, but ever grounded in the lessons born of hardship. Jasmine organized a weekend art class in our backyard, gathering neighborhood children who reveled in the rainbow chaos of sidewalk chalk and watercolors. Jade and Joy initiated a kindness club at school, encouraging small acts of generosity, a handwritten note for a lonely classmate, a surprise flower for a teacher, help cleaning up after recess. The cumulative effect was transformative. The echo of Joanne's spirit seemed ever present, not as a painful absence, but as the source of a hopeful, forward-looking legacy. The clarity of our boundaries, painfully won yet powerfully kept, also renewed my relationship with the surrounding community. Lessons bloom. Where once some viewed my choices with suspicion or quiet criticism, now they witnessed proof in my children's thriving. Old friends who'd once offered conditional support saw the results of unwavering resolve, and some even confided their own, quietly born struggles with overbearing helpers or unwelcome intrusions into their homes. Our story, once a whispered cautionary tale, became a beacon for others navigating their own recoveries. Lessons bloom. Throughout it all, Grace remained a steadfast presence, as much a chosen part of the family as anyone by blood or marriage. Her compassion came without strings. Her friendship once guarded by mutual grief, now unspooled easily across kitchen tables and backyard gatherings. Together, we led Cub Scout meetings, organized church picnics, and made room for laughter in spaces that had once only known resignation or sorrow. Each new shared memory layered gently over the old wounds, sealing them not in denial, but in acceptance and hope. By this stage, I had grown into a different version of myself, one forged not just by trauma, but by the act of healing and the daily practice of parenting with intention. I learned to cherish not only the grand gestures of love, but also the small, consistent acts that built trust each day anew. My perspective on family, friendship, and community had forever shifted. Where I once assumed loyalty and helpfulness were always virtues, I now understood that true love respects autonomy and never demands repayment for its own sake. As the autumn sun began casting golden light over our neighborhood, the girls and I prepared for a new chapter, our first real vacation since Joanne's death. We planned a road trip to the Smoky Mountains, a symbol of renewal and freedom. For weeks, the girls collected brochures, mapped out hikes, and devised menus for campfire cooking. Friends contributed camping gear, and Grace volunteered her old tent, which had seen more adventure than any of us could count. The trip itself was a kaleidoscope of firsts. We hiked misty trails at dawn, watched the world emerge from clouds, and let mountain streams cool our feet after long hours on hidden paths. At night, we told ghost stories, roasted marshmallows, and gazed at stars that turned the sky to deep indigo velvet. Each night beside the fire, I watched my daughters, scraped knees and beaming grins, singing harmonies that filled the stillness, and I thought of Joanne, grateful that her wish for us to be courageous and open-hearted was finally being realized. During quiet moments on the trail, I reflected on the nature of healing. Recovery, I acknowledged, wasn't about erasing pain or pretending betrayal hadn't happened. It was about remembering where hurt had tried to take root and deliberately, again and again, planting something kinder in its place. The girls, in their openness to new friendships and new challenges, modeled this lesson with every step. They were living proof that while hurt could injure, it could not defeat, so long as love, not just romantic, but deep, enduring, familial love, was fostered and fiercely protected. At the end of each hike, as we bundled into sleeping bags and exchanged stories under the low hiss of the lantern, the trust in their eyes was its own victory. As the seasons passed and our lives continued to bloom, I found myself looking back on the journey with a sense of gratitude and humility I'd never anticipated. The pain of loss, of betrayal, taught me more about resilience than any joy ever could. I learned to appreciate every stage, the confusion, the anger, the tentative first steps toward restoration, because each phase held its own gifts. The girls rarely asked about Laura now, but when her name came up, perhaps a fleeting encounter at church or a reference in one of Joanne's scrapbooks, I answered them honestly. She was a big part of our story. I'd say. But we learned what our family needs to feel whole and safe. Not everyone who offers help is meant to stay forever. We listen to each other, honor what feels right, and that's how we keep moving forward. There was no room for bitterness, only calm resolve and a respect for the lessons hard learned. Career-wise, I found fulfillment returning to projects Joanne and I had once dreamed about, a small backyard renovation business, with extra time spent volunteering in after-school programs. The girls delighted in helping with plans and designs, discovering their own abilities as builders, gardeners, and planners. Sometimes, I caught glimpses of Joanne in them, a headstrong tilt of the chin, a sly joke, a burst of song on a slow afternoon. These signs no longer brought grief, but gratitude, woven forever into the pattern of our lives. Grace's friendship deepened with time, and though we approached the possibility of romance cautiously, we both treasured the rare gift of a bond built from shared hardship and mutual transformation. The girls adored her, and our blended families created new holiday traditions, joint dinners, shared celebrations, group camping trips that filled the air with laughter and warmth. There was no rush, no pressure. Only the delight of discovering joy could again find us, even when we thought hope was lost for good. Looking back, the hardest part of our journey was not banishing darkness, but learning to live in the light again, to trust not just others, but ourselves, to recognize the difference between help that heals and help that harms. That lesson, I realized, was the legacy Joanne most wanted us to carry forward, the fierce conviction that love, when chosen and fiercely protected, could overcome anything. No story of recovery is ever truly over. New challenges arose. Adolescence in all its messy glory. Friendships that required close watching. Attitudes that sometimes echoed the distant pain of earlier hurts. Yet as the girls navigated these inevitable storms, they did so buoyed by a sense of self-worth and safety that no manipulator could ever again undermine. Jasmine entered high school and experimented with new clubs and passions, always returning to her art as an anchor. She sometimes confided in me about friendship struggles, aware now that it was okay, necessary even, to voice discomfort when someone crossed her boundaries. I told her again and again, your gut matters. If you're ever uneasy, trust yourself first. The look of relief on her face was all the proof I needed that our struggles had transformed us for the better. Jade, no longer content to fade into the background, spoke up for friends when they felt overlooked or overwhelmed. Lessons bloom. She became known for fairness, organizing study groups and stepping in when bullying threatened her peers. I'm not afraid to set rules now, Dad. I know what safe feels like, she told me one evening while organizing her debate notes. I nodded, pride swelling. Joy, who had once shied away from new things, was now the eager initiator. Whether it was a new hiking trail, trying out for the swim team, or inviting new students to join her lunch table, she was tender, observant, and most importantly, joyful. I like our life, she said simply one night. I hope we always keep loving each other this much. Every so often the girls asked if I thought their mother would be proud. Sometimes the question took my breath away. I would always pull them close and say, "Your mom would be proud, not just because you're strong, but because you love fiercely enough to keep us together, even when it's hard." That's the bravest thing of all. These were the moments that defined us, not the tragedies that entered our lives, but the ways we insisted on moving forward, together, arms linked, navigating each day as both a challenge and a blessing. Lessons bloom, rooted in our heritage. If there is one lesson I hope our story imparts, it is this: even the strongest light can be threatened by shadows. But it is in recognizing, confronting, and naming those shadows that families are truly protected. Love does not mean never letting anyone close. Lessons bloom. It means being vigilant, learning from pain, and trusting those you love enough to let them help, but only as far as your heart feels safe. The journey from devastation to hope was neither swift nor easy. Joanne's last words, that I should love again, protect our daughters, and trust in happiness, became my guiding constellation when the night was darkest and the way forward seemed impossible. Through the courage of my children, the steadfast faith of friends like Grace, and the slow, sometimes painful acquisition of wisdom, we built something more beautiful than I could have ever envisioned in my loneliest hour. If you are listening, grieving, rebuilding, questioning whom to trust, know this: you are not alone. The voice of caution in your heart is not weakness, but wisdom hard-won. Do not be afraid to set boundaries, to say no, or to walk away from even the helpers who linger too long. Let love in, but make it earn its place. And above all, trust in your own resilience. The family you defend, the peace you reclaim, will one day blossom into a legacy of courage and hope. Our story was forged in heartbreak, but it endures in laughter, unity, and the sacred promise that those who survive dark winters together someday welcome the most glorious springs. To all those beginning their own journey, keep going. Choose love, again and again. That is how you make it safely home.